I woke up on Easter Sunday to the sound of my phone buzzing. At 69 years old, I'm usually up by 6, but that morning I'd allowed myself to sleep in until 7:30. It was Easter, after all. I'd been planning to make my famous cinnamon rolls for breakfast, the ones my son Marcus always loved as a child. I'd bought the ingredients 3 days ago, along with a small ham for dinner and fresh asparagus that I knew his girlfriend Vanessa claimed to enjoy. My phone was on the nightstand, still plugged into its charger. The screen glowed with notification after notification. I reached for it, squinting without my reading glasses, and saw they were all from Facebook. "Congratulations, Eleanor. Beautiful ceremony. Your son looks so happy." I sat up slowly, my heart beginning to beat just a little faster. I unlocked my phone and opened Facebook. The first thing I saw was Marcus's profile picture. It had changed. He was wearing a dark navy suit, his arm around Vanessa, who was in a flowing white dress, holding a bouquet of white roses and eucalyptus. Behind them was red rock landscape that could only be Sedona. The caption read, "Just married to my best friend. Intimate ceremony with the people who matter most. Blessed beyond measure." I scrolled through the photos, 27 of them. Marcus and Vanessa exchanging vows under an arch decorated with white flowers, Vanessa's parents beaming in the front row. Marcus's best friend from college standing as best man. A small reception at what looked like an upscale resort. Champagne toasts, cake cutting, dancing. I wasn't in a single photograph. I sat there in my bedroom, in the condo I'd been living in for the past 2 years, holding my phone, looking at pictures of my only son's wedding, a wedding I hadn't known was happening, a wedding I hadn't been invited to. The morning light coming through my window was soft and golden, the kind of light that usually makes me feel grateful. But that morning, the light didn't reach the cold spot forming in my chest. I set the phone down carefully on my nightstand. My hands were steady. I thought I would cry. I waited for the tears to come, for my throat to close up, for that awful pressure behind my eyes. But nothing came. Instead, I felt very, very calm. And in that calmness, I started to think. Really think. Not about what I should feel or how a mother should react, but about what was actually true. The truth was simple. My son had gotten married yesterday without telling me. He'd planned a wedding, invited guests, posted photos on social media, and never once mentioned it to his own mother. The mother who was living in his investment property. The mother who had made his investment property possible. I got out of bed and walked to my kitchen. The condo was small but lovely, a 1-bedroom unit in a newer building in North Phoenix. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the pool and the mountains beyond. Modern finishes throughout. Stainless steel appliances, quartz countertops. It had cost Marcus $320,000 2 years ago. I knew the exact amount because I'd provided $240,000 of it. I made coffee, measured the grounds carefully, added water, pressed the button. While it brewed, I walked to my small office area and pulled out a file folder from my desk drawer. It was burgundy-colored, the kind with accordion sides that expand to hold a lot of papers. I'd always been organized. 37 years as an accountant had trained me to keep meticulous records. Every receipt, every bank statement, every piece of financial documentation related to this condo was in this folder. Let me tell you how I ended up here. My husband Richard died 3 years ago. Heart attack at 67. Sudden and devastating. We'd been married for 42 years. He'd been a good man, a careful planner, and he'd left me comfortable. The life insurance policy was substantial. Our house in Scottsdale, the one we'd bought when Marcus was in elementary school, was fully paid off and worth about $650,000. After Richard died, I was lost. The house felt enormous and empty. Every room reminded me of him. His reading chair in the living room. His tools still organized in the garage. His side of the closet with shirts I couldn't bring myself to touch. Marcus started visiting more often, which I appreciated. He'd bring takeout and we'd eat dinner together. And for a few hours the house wouldn't feel so hollow. About 6 months after the funeral, Marcus sat me down one evening. He had an opportunity, he said, a chance to get into real estate investment, which was booming in Phoenix. There was a new development going up, condos in a great location, and he wanted to buy one. Not to live in, but as an investment property he could rent out. The problem was the down payment. He had some money saved, about $80,000, but he needed more to avoid PMI and get a better interest rate. "Here's what I'm thinking. Mom," he'd said, his voice earnest and excited. "What if you moved into the condo? You've been saying the house is too big. The condo would be perfect for you. 1 bedroom, easy maintenance, and I'd charge you below market rent, really reasonable. You'd be helping me build equity while downsizing to something more manageable." When he put it that way, it seemed like we'd both win. I'd escape the lonely house full of memories, and I'd help my son get started in real estate investing. Vanessa, who he'd been dating for about a year at that point, was a real estate agent. She'd found the property, ran all the numbers, showed me floor plans and projections. It all looked very professional. The conversation that followed happened over several weeks, but essentially, this was the agreement. I would sell my house and provide $240,000 toward the purchase of the $320,000 condo. Marcus would put in $80,000. The mortgage, taxes, and HOA fees would be about $1,500 a month. I would pay $1,000 in rent, which was genuinely below market for a place like that. Marcus would cover the remaining $500 plus any maintenance issues since it was his investment property. I sold my house for $635,000. After closing costs and agent fees, I walked away with about $590,000. I gave Marcus the $240,000 for the condo down payment. The remaining $350,000 I kept in savings and investments. That money was supposed to be my security, my emergency fund, my legacy. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs I ignored. Marcus had insisted his name be the only one on the title. For tax purposes, he'd explained. Since it's an investment property, trust me, Mom. This is how you do it. Vanessa had nodded along, pulling up articles on her phone about real estate investment strategies. I'd questioned it. I remember saying, "But Marcus, if I'm putting in 3/4 of the money, shouldn't my name be on it too?" He'd looked hurt. "Mom, don't you trust me? I'm your son. Everything I have will be yours someday anyway. This is just the smart way to structure it for taxes." So I'd signed papers that put me down as a tenant, paying rent to my own son for a condo I'd primarily financed. I told myself it was fine. Family helps family. And for the first year, everything seemed fine. Then the requests started. Small at first. Marcus needed help with the HOA special assessment for building repairs. $2,000. "Just this once, Mom. I'm a little short this month." Then Vanessa's car broke down and needed a new transmission. $3,500. "I'll pay you back, I promise. We're just between commission checks." 6 months ago, Marcus told me about his startup idea. He and 2 partners were launching a digital marketing agency. They had clients lined up, a business plan, everything. They just needed capital. $50,000 would give him a 20% stake. "Mom, this is huge. In 2 years, this could be worth 5 times that. You'd be set for life." I'd hesitated on that one. $50,000 was a lot of money. But Marcus had been so passionate, so certain, and Vanessa had shown me projected earnings on a spreadsheet. It looked impressive. So I'd written the check, watching my savings account drop from $350,000 to $300,000. The startup lasted 7 months before it folded. The market wasn't ready, Marcus had explained. Timing is everything in business. He'd been disappointed but not devastated. Easy come, easy go when it's someone else's money. Then there was the furniture. Vanessa had wanted to redecorate their apartment, the place they actually lived in across town. She'd shown me photos of a dining set she loved. "Marcus wants to surprise me for my birthday," she'd mentioned casually one afternoon when she'd stopped by. "But it's $3,500. If you could help with even half, that would mean so much." I'd helped with all of it. Because that's what I thought family did. That's what I thought love looked like. I kept a spreadsheet, old accountant habits, tracking every dollar I'd given or lent or invested. The total, as of 2 months ago, was $312,000. The condo down payment alone was $240,000. Add in the startup, the furniture, the car repairs, the HOA assessments, the wedding shower gift I'd given them last year for what I thought was going to be an engagement that turned into wedding planning I'd be part of. Last year. That's when they'd gotten engaged. Marcus had proposed to Vanessa at the Desert Botanical Garden, a beautiful spot at sunset. They'd posted photos, and I'd commented congratulations. A week later, they'd come over for dinner, and I'd asked about wedding plans. "Oh, we're thinking something small and intimate," Vanessa had said, picking at her salad. "Nothing too traditional. Maybe next year." "Whatever makes you happy," I'd said. "I'm just excited to be part of it." Marcus had glanced at Vanessa, then back at his plate. "Of course, Mom. We'll figure it out." But figuring it out, apparently, meant planning a wedding without telling me. Booking a venue in Sedona, hiring a photographer, inviting guests, all while I made cinnamon rolls in my tiny kitchen and paid rent on a property I'd financed, waiting for my son to include me in his life. I was still standing in my office area, holding the burgundy folder, when I heard footsteps outside my door. Then voices. Marcus's laugh, distinct and familiar. A key turning in the lock. My lock. On my door, except it wasn't really my door, was it? The door opened, and Marcus walked in, Vanessa right behind him. They both stopped when they saw me standing there. Marcus was still in his dress shirt from yesterday, sleeves rolled up, tie gone. Vanessa wore yoga pants and one of Marcus's sweatshirts. She was carrying a to-go coffee cup. "Mom," Marcus said, his face going through several expressions at once. Surprise, guilt, defiance, settling on forced cheerfulness. "You're up. We were just coming by to tell you the news." I looked at them both, at my son who had my late husband's eyes, and apparently none of his integrity, at the woman who was now technically my daughter-in-law, who I'd written checks to and welcomed into my life, who was holding a $4 latte while I paid $1,000 a month to live in a condo I'd paid for. "Tell me the news," I repeated, my voice calm. "The news that's already on Facebook with 27 photos and 143 comments." Vanessa had the decency to look uncomfortable. Marcus ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd done since he was a little boy when he was caught doing something wrong. "Look, Mom. I know this looks bad." "It doesn't look bad, Marcus. It is bad." I was still holding the folder. "You got married yesterday, without telling me. Without inviting me. Your own mother." "It wasn't like that," Vanessa jumped in. "It was super last minute. We just decided to do it. Very spontaneous. We didn't want a big fuss." I looked at the photos on my phone, which I'd left on the kitchen counter. "There are at least 30 people in these pictures, Vanessa. Someone coordinated all those flowers. Someone made that cake. Someone reserved that venue. That's not spontaneous. That's planned." Marcus stepped forward. "We knew you'd make it into a big thing. You'd want to be involved in every detail. Have opinions about everything. We just wanted something simple that was about us." The words hit me with unexpected clarity. Not pain. Not yet. Just clarity. They'd planned a wedding without me not because it was spontaneous, but because they didn't want me there. Because my presence, my involvement, my motherhood was an inconvenience to them. "I see," I said quietly. "And did you use simple, spontaneous planning when you took my $240,000 for this condo? Was that also just about you?" The room went very quiet. Vanessa took a sip of her coffee. Marcus's jaw tightened. "That's not fair, Mom. That was an investment opportunity. A business arrangement." "A business arrangement," I repeated. I opened the burgundy folder and pulled out a piece of paper. "If it's a business arrangement, then I'd like to discuss the terms." I'd been preparing this for 2 weeks. Not because I knew about the wedding, I didn't, but because 2 weeks ago, I'd overheard something that had opened my eyes. I'd been on my small patio, reading a book, when I heard voices from the patio next door. The walls between units aren't thick, and sound travels, especially when people think they're alone. It was Marcus and Vanessa, who had apparently let themselves into the vacant unit next to mine that was for sale. They were viewing it, discussing something. "This one would be perfect," Vanessa had said. "We could combine them eventually, knock down a wall, Really maximize the investment? I don't know. Marcus had replied. We'd need another big chunk for the down payment. Just ask your mom again. She always says yes. I know. But I'm running out of excuses. The startup thing didn't work out. She's asking about the money more lately. Vanessa had laughed. Well, once we're married, we can set better boundaries. Make it clear this is our property, our investment. She's just renting. If she doesn't like the terms, she can find somewhere else to live. I'd sat very still on my patio, my book forgotten in my lap. I hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound, just listened as they'd continued talking about maximizing returns and elderly housing options and how emotional I'd been getting lately about money. That night, I'd pulled out every document I had. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every piece of paper that showed where my money had gone, and I'd called someone I should have called a long time ago. My friend Janet's daughter was a real estate attorney. I'd known her since she was in middle school. Her name was Rebecca, and she agreed to look over everything. The news hadn't been good. Because Marcus's name was the only name on the title, the condo was legally his. My $240,000 was considered a gift in the eyes of the law since I'd never had him sign a promissory note. The other money, the startup investment, the car repairs, the furniture, all of it was gone. Legally, I had no claim to any of it. But, Rebecca had said, her voice careful, you do have tenant rights. You've been paying rent consistently for 2 years. He can't just evict you without proper notice. And if you wanted to push, you could make things very complicated for him. Make him prove this was always meant to be a landlord-tenant relationship and not a family arrangement where you'd have equity. She'd given me options, all of them legal, all of them messy, all of them requiring me to decide what I actually wanted, which was the hard part. What I wanted was my son back. The little boy who used to help me bake cookies. The teenager who called me from college just to hear my voice. The young man who'd cried at his father's funeral and held my hand through the service. But that person was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed the way I thought he had. And I was standing in a condo I'd paid for, being visited by a son who'd gotten married without me, and a daughter-in-law who saw me as an ATM with emotional complications. What terms? Marcus asked now, his tone wary. I looked down at the paper in my hand. It was a simple document Rebecca had helped me draft. I'm offering you 2 options, Marcus. Option 1. You buy out my contribution to this property. $240,000, the amount I put toward the down payment, plus $50,000 in improvements and rent payments over market value. Total of $290,000. You have 90 days to secure financing or sell the unit. Marcus's face had gone pale. Mom, I can't get that kind of money in 90 days. That's insane. Option 2. I continued calmly. You agree to add my name to the title as a 50% owner. We refinance the property to reflect this ownership structure. I continue paying my current rent, which will now be going toward a property I actually own. Vanessa had set down her coffee cup. You can't do this. This is extortion. This is business, Vanessa. Marcus reminded me, this is a business arrangement, so let's treat it like business. I have tenant rights. I have documentation of my financial contributions, and I have an attorney who's very interested in the case. What attorney? Marcus demanded. Rebecca Chen. You remember her. Janet's daughter. She specializes in real estate law and elder financial abuse. The words elder financial abuse hung in the air between us. Marcus flinched. I never abused you, Mom. I never forced you to give me money. No, I agreed. You just took advantage of a grieving widow who wanted to help her son. You just accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars while making promises you never intended to keep. You just got married without inviting your own mother, while living off her money. My voice had stayed level the entire time. No yelling, no crying, just facts. The accountant in me, presenting the numbers. Marcus sat down heavily on my couch. I don't have that kind of money. Even if I sold this place, after the mortgage payoff and agent fees, there wouldn't be enough to pay you back and buy something else. Then I suggest option 2. Add my name to the title. Vanessa's not going to like that. I looked at Vanessa, who was staring at me with something like respect mixed with anger. Vanessa isn't on the title either. I pointed out. So Vanessa's preferences aren't relevant to this property discussion. This is crazy, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its edge. He sounded tired, defeated. Can we just talk about this like family? I tried to be family, Marcus. I gave you money. I supported your dreams. I asked for almost nothing in return. And you couldn't even include me in your wedding day. I folded the paper and held it out to him. You have until the end of the week to decide. Either option, or I contact an attorney about pursuing my contributions. Marcus took the paper without looking at it. Vanessa put her hand on his shoulder, whispering something I couldn't hear. They left a few minutes later without saying goodbye. After they were gone, I sat down on my couch and finally let myself feel it. Not the money, though that hurt. Not even the wedding, though that had cut deep. It was the realization that I'd spent 2 years trying to buy my way into my son's life, and all I'd purchased was a tenant agreement. 3 days later, Marcus called. He'd spoken with a mortgage broker. He couldn't qualify for a cash-out refinance large enough to pay me back. Selling would leave him underwater after agent commissions and closing costs. He wanted to discuss option 2, adding me to the title, but he had conditions. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. Vanessa wasn't with him, which I took as a small mercy. He looked like he hadn't slept much. Good. I talked to a real estate attorney, he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Not Rebecca. Someone Vanessa knows. He said you probably have a case that you made contributions expecting equity, that I should have documented everything as loans or gifts. That it's messy. It is messy, I agreed. He also said fighting it would be expensive and time-consuming, and there's no guarantee either of us would win. I waited. So, I'll do it. Add your name to the title. 50-50. But Mom, I need you to stop asking me for money back. The startup, the other stuff. We can't afford it. This has to be the end of it. Part of me wanted to laugh. He was asking me to stop asking him for my money back. But another part of me, the part that was so tired of fighting, just wanted it to be over. Fine, I said. Add my name to the title. Legal ownership. And Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm not angry about the money. Money I can earn back, save again, manage. I'm angry that you treated me like an inconvenience. Like a bank that got too emotional. Like someone whose feelings didn't matter as long as the checks cleared. He stared into his coffee. I didn't mean for it to be like that, but it was. We signed the paperwork 4 weeks later. My name went on the title. 50% owner of a condo I'd paid 75% for, but at least it was something. At least it was legally mine now. But here's the thing about getting what you thought you wanted. Sometimes it shows you that what you wanted isn't enough. I still lived in that condo. I still saw Marcus occasionally, awkward conversations in the hallway or brief text messages about building maintenance. Vanessa avoided me entirely, and every day, I'd wake up in that space and feel the weight of everything that had happened. 6 months after the title change, I made a decision. I contacted a real estate agent, not Vanessa, and listed my half of the property for sale. Marcus had right of first refusal per our agreement. He didn't take it, couldn't afford to buy me out. So we sold it to a young couple from California who paid cash and closed in 3 weeks. After all the paperwork was settled, after the mortgage was paid off, and the agent fees were deducted, my half came to $142,000. Added to the savings I had left, I had about $470,000 total. Not as much as I'd started with, but enough. I found a place at Desert Bloom Senior Living, a community on the east side of Phoenix, not a nursing home, just a complex designed for active adults 55 and over. My apartment was small but bright, with a patio that overlooked a fountain and walking paths lined with desert landscaping. The community had a fitness center, a pool, organized activities, and the best part, people who chose to be there, who weren't obligated by blood or guilt or financial arrangements. My first week there, I met Dorothy at a book club meeting. She was 72, a retired nurse, and she made me laugh within 5 minutes of meeting her. She introduced me to Tom and Linda, a couple who played pickleball every morning, and invited me to join. I started saying yes to things. Yes to water aerobics. Yes to the community garden plot. Yes to potluck dinners and movie nights and day trips to Sedona and Prescott. I took up watercolor painting. Turns out, I wasn't half bad at it. Tom was a retired art teacher and he gave me pointers. I joined a financial literacy group that met twice a month, where I helped other seniors understand their retirement accounts and avoid scams. It felt good to use my skills again, to be valued for what I knew instead of what I could provide. Marcus called occasionally. Brief conversations, surface-level updates. He and Vanessa had moved to a cheaper apartment. His new job was going well. They were thinking about getting a dog. He never apologized. Not really. And I never asked him to. Because I'd realized something in those months of watercolors and book clubs and morning pickleball games. I didn't need his apology. I needed my own life back. One Sunday morning, almost a year after I'd moved to Desert Bloom, Dorothy knocked on my door with pastries from the French bakery we'd discovered in Scottsdale. "Happy Easter," she said, handing me a coffee and a chocolate croissant. I'd completely forgotten it was Easter. Last year, I'd spent the morning crying over wedding photos I hadn't been invited to take. This year, I was wearing my painting clothes and had plans to work on a landscape piece for the community art show. "Happy Easter," I said, accepting the coffee and croissant. "Want to come in?" I just started a new painting. We spent the morning on my patio, Dorothy reading her book while I painted, both of us in comfortable silence. Around noon, Tom and Linda stopped by and we decided to walk to the community center for the Easter potluck. I hadn't brought anything, but Linda had made extra deviled eggs and said we could share credit. The potluck was lovely. Ham and sweet potatoes and green beans and at least 6 different desserts. Someone played guitar. We sang old songs, not church hymns but folk songs and Beatles tunes. I sat between Dorothy and a man named Frank, who'd recently moved in, and who made everyone laugh with stories about his years as a high school principal. Walking back to my apartment that evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Happy Easter, Mom. Hope you're doing well." I looked at it for a moment, then put my phone back in my pocket without responding. Not out of anger or spite, but because I was in the middle of a good day and I didn't want to leave it to deal with complicated feelings about my son. Later that night, after I'd changed into my pajamas and made myself chamomile tea, I sat on my patio and finally texted him back. "Thank you. I am doing well. Hope you're happy." Short, true, complete. I looked out at the desert landscape, the mountains dark against the purple sky, the lights from other apartments glowing warm in the dusk. I thought about the house I'd sold, the condo I'd financed, the wedding I'd missed, the money I'd given. All of it trying to hold on to something that was already gone. And then I thought about Dorothy and Tom and Linda and Frank and the art show next month where my painting would hang on a wall, about the financial literacy workshop I was leading on Tuesday, about the trip to Santa Fe that a group of us were planning for next fall. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, standing in an empty house full of memories, accepting an invitation to live small in the margins of her son's life. And I thought about the woman I was now, living deliberately in a community she'd chosen, painting mountains and teaching workshops and eating chocolate croissants on Easter morning with a friend who'd shown up at her door just because. The money was mostly gone. My relationship with my son was forever changed, probably never to be what I'd hoped. But I'd gotten something back that I'd lost years before Richard died, before Marcus started asking for help, before I made myself small trying to fit into spaces that weren't meant for me. I'd gotten myself back, my time, my choices, my peace, my Tuesday mornings and Sunday evenings, my right to say no, and my freedom to say yes to things that actually filled me instead of emptied me. And sitting there in the cooling desert air, holding my tea and looking at the stars beginning to appear one by one in the darkening sky, I realized something I should have known all along. You can't buy love. You can't purchase belonging. You can't write a check big enough to make someone see your worth, but you can choose to see it yourself. You can decide that your life, your resources, your time are valuable. You can walk away from people who treat you like an ATM and toward people who treat you like a friend. You can start over at 69 and discover that starting over looks a lot like coming home to yourself. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. "Can we talk sometime? I'd like to see you." Maybe we would. Someday. When I was ready. When I'd fully healed. when I could sit across from my son and not calculate in my head how much each conversation was costing me emotionally. But not tonight. Tonight I was exactly where I wanted to be. In my small apartment that I'd chosen, drinking tea I'd made, planning a life that belonged entirely to me, and that, I'd learned, was worth more than any amount I'd ever deposited into someone else's dream.